Time to call the Legislation Rules Committee hearing to order. Cora, please call the roll.
Alderman Narayan,
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Velasquez,
Present.
Chair Ballmer,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 3 present. We have a quorum.
All right. With that, moving on, we will move for a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
So moved.
Entertain a second.
Second.
Second. All right. Cora, please call the roll.
Alderman Narayan,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez,
Aye.
Chair Ballmer.
Aye.
We have 4 aye votes.
All right. That will move forward to our one and only item today, Board Bill number 30 as amended. And I believe we're all familiar with it. I don't believe we need to put Aura through reading it all. But Alderman Aldridge, would you like to go through your amendments first before we do this, as we did last time, or how would you like to?
Yep. I would love to adopt the amendments so that people know what board bills in front of them. So I'll just explain amendment number 1. So amendment number 1 and both amendments that I'm bringing forward to the committee today, after receiving the full recommendations from the Charter Commission, they're looking at 7 of them. After receiving those recommendations Friday, I took the language that they had to make sure that this bill is in line with their language, so that one of the amendments that they're looking at 7 can make sure that it's lined up and it's not a total bill. So amendment number 1 basically strikes out on page 1, line 18, strikes out several sentences and it inserts basically verbiage that says the Board of Aldermen has the ability to increase on any appropriation bill, and anytime that there is an increase, there is the same power of decreasing. So if we increase or if we decrease 200,000, we must increase 200,000 so that we do not throw the budget out. So it has an increasing language as well as the equal decreasing and increasing.
All right. We'll go through any questions on the amendments. Alderwoman Velasquez. No questions? All
No
right.
questions.
Alderman Narayan, any questions as to amendment 1?
No questions. Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, any questions as to amendment 1?
No questions, thank you.
I don't believe we need public input on the amendments, because once they're in the board bill, we'll consider the whole board bill as a whole. And at that point, so with that, we can entertain a motion to adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 30 as amended. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
A second.
Previous roll.
Hearing no objection to previous roll, we have adopted amendment number 1 to Board Bill 30 as amended. Alderman Aldridge, you are recognized on board amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Amendment number 2, again on page 2, line 19, it strikes out budget authority and inserts the following words: any increase made to the amount of the items in the proposed in the City of St. Louis annual budget shall be offset by the reduction. Again, this is just stating anytime that there's a reduction that it has to be offset by the same amount with the increase, so that we cannot reduce 300,000 and then try to increase 400,000. It again, the same amount where you reduce is where you increase. It's kind of the same thing, balancing budget process that we do on the state level, but wanted to make sure that language was in all sections of the bill.
Okay. Do we have any questions to the sponsor as to amendment number 2? Alderman Velasquez, no. Alderman Narayan, any questions or comments?
No questions. Thank you.
Alderman Clark Hubbard.
No questions, thank you.
All right, at that point, we'll entertain a motion for the adoption of amendment 2.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Previous roll.
Yes.
Hearing no objection, second amendment. We now have before us Board Bill number 30 as amended, as amended. All right, with this, you have some speakers here. Mr. Aldridge, you have a order in which you'd like them to go?
It would probably make sense to have the director go and then the chair and then the vice chair. Now that we do have the board bill amended, I just want to say, again, this is a board bill that is one of the charter recommendations to give the Board of Aldermen the ability to have increasing power, but also wanted to ensure that where we decrease, we have the same amount of increasing. I also want to thank both speakers, chair and vice chair, for being here. I know there was a concern last meeting. Are we moving without the Charter Commission? And I think their comments, I'll save it for them, will kind of double down that this is the process that they already laid out. And we're just taking our duties here at the Board of Aldermen to make sure that it doesn't get held up in the process and all their hard work is not in vain. But that's all I have. And you can go to the speakers, Mr. Chair.
All right, yes, thank you. Because last time, 2 weeks ago, I was concerned that, we had opposite angles of entry here. And also, I always want to hear from our budget director, Paul Payne, with anything that, having been the chairman of that committee before in the past, the process is lengthy. Making sure that what we're doing doesn't make it lengthier or more difficult. So, Mr. Payne, I believe I'd have to swear you in. So if you raise your right hand. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Okay, I believe you're muted, Paul.
I do.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, please proceed with any questions, comments, or your opinion of this whole matter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And Alderman Aldridge, I know we discussed this a little bit yesterday after the budget committee, and I appreciate the amendment that you made there. I did want to give the committee a little bit of history about the budget process overall. The current budget process was a result of a charter reform that was approved by the voters in 1987. Prior to that amendment or charter reform that occurred back then, you had a system where the budget went on and on. The deliberation over the budget went on and on for months. Fortunately, my tenure started the very first year after that occurred, so I didn't have to do that. But I remember seeing the articles where the Board of Aldermen was contemplating the budget around Thanksgiving time, and it just kept going on and on. And the idea was that they would pass a continuing resolution to have the previous budget still in effect and all. And it wasn't good for our financial outlook. It wasn't good for just as a best practice in city government. And so, as a result of that, they proposed the current form of the budget process, which is to ensure that there is some give and take between the two elected bodies, both the Board of E&A and the Board of Aldermen, and most importantly, that we have a balanced budget by the start of the fiscal year, which is July 1st. By the way, that amendment also, that charter reform also moved our fiscal year, which used to start in May, to July 1, and that's which makes it consistent with the state fiscal year. And as I indicated to sponsor a little bit, I am reticent about what this proposes simply because the way that the system works today, and yesterday was a good example of that because we went through the budget committee yesterday, was that the Board of Aldermen has the power to decrease but not increase without the approval of E&A. Now, but the power to decrease is a significant power. I mean, basically, it provides to say, hey, look, we want to see these particular increases and we're going to take it out of here. And then you pass it on to E&A and they begin to rethink about it. And so what you end up resulting is a collaborative effort in order to produce the balanced budget in time. This would seem to be a different approach. I mean, basically what you're setting up is a budget that's submitted, and then the Board of E&A or the mayor's office proposes the budget, and then you have a change in the Board of Aldermen where you may be increasing and decreasing, but then that's a potential conflict with the mayor's office. Then you have, I guess I'm scratching my head, I'm thinking, well, what does that mean? We're not going to have a budget by July 1? If there is let's say, one of those actions requires something that the particular mayor's office does not want to have, and there's a veto, does that mean I am going to be able to, not going to be able to tell the rating agencies, yes, we will have a balanced budget, and yes, it'll be in place by July 1, as the city is arguing over vetoes during the month of July. That's the concern that I have going forward. I think the system we have forces a collaboration between two elected bodies. And I think by separating out those powers, basically you're saying, hey, we want to go it on our own versus working with the other elected body. Currently it's the Board of E&A. Under any other potential scenario, it would be with the mayor's office. I think there are alternatives, and I wish the Charter Commission had considered some other alternatives than that. But I think that's a potential risk in what you are proposing. Also, if you think about it from just an administrative standpoint, I can also see this developing further into, right now you have, for instance, my role as budget director. Now you're talking about the future, and whoever is going to be that in the future, you're going to be looking at that and say, all right, that position reports to the mayor's office, or whatever that structure is in the future. As a Board of Aldermen member, you're going to say, well, I'm getting numbers now, but I know that this person reports in that form or to that authority. We want our own authority. And so you end up with a competing structure. So similar to federal government, where you have an Office of Management and Budget that reports to the president, and then you got a Congressional Budget Office that reports to the Congress. I think that's a duplication of effort, and it's not really necessary if you have a system where you're collaborating together as two elected officials or two elected bodies that collaborate to come together. Because right now, I can tell you from my own experience, I've been here 36 years and 17 as director, I've never been at a point where the numbers presented are from a political standpoint. It's always been, this is what I believe the numbers to be. It's not some sort of political pressure in terms of presenting a budget to changing any numbers to create a certain picture. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right or wrong in any given year. You can be up and over or under, but it does provide a little bit of objectivity when it comes to actually projections and all. And I think there's the potential for losing that under this structure. And that's sort of the basic thoughts in addition to that amendment we discussed yesterday that I would offer to the committee on this. Again, I think there is a different way of going about it. Primarily, I think you want to be able to avoid that conflict at the end of the fiscal year and coming up with a budget that you can collaborate on as opposed to butt heads with. And most importantly, you also need to ensure that the budget is in place, balanced and in place July 1st at the start of the fiscal year. Otherwise, that becomes another credit weakness when the rating agencies look at us and try to assess our fiscal situation.
All right, we'll go through the committee. Alderman Velasquez, any questions of Director Payne?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Payne, for being here. And I want to say I hear your concern. And also maybe this is something that the folks from the Charter Commission can speak to. I think we are an outlier, as kind of I understand how our government operates, that there are other plenty of cities like Kansas City, for instance, there. I know that they have a different structure, but they also have more authority over the budget than we do. And they have a they have a council mayor structure. It's not, I guess my question is, and maybe it's just for the group as they come through, is we are the exception, I think, in a lot of city government structures. So I guess, like, how do folks, I mean, they get their budget in on time. I mean, other cities do. So, I mean, if we move to this again, because I think we are the outlier generally, do you have, suggestions or other things? Because I mean, other cities do seem to be able to get the budget in on time, and their government, their legislative body has more, authority in adding and decreasing than we currently do.
Oh, sure. I think Kansas City is actually a pretty good example. I mean, you've got a city manager form of government, but they both, but what it does is it forces again, a coordinated effort towards the budget as opposed to competing bodies on the budget. And I think that's one that should be considered. I'm actually surprised that it hasn't been, but in that process, but that is one that and given that you've got an example just right across the state, and that's something to consider.
Right, but I mean, I don't want to jam up this whole conversation. And Joe Extender, I'll try and get us done before the hour ends. But I mean, I think just the idea, and this is, I think, for both Ms. Bobo and Mr. Sheridan too. I mean, there are other cities who still get their budget in. I agree. I mean, I never saw this as something as always in collaboration. I think a lot of us want, I will use my eyes here, good governance, right? And also, it's not uncommon for the legislative body to have more input on the budget than St. Louis currently does, including Kansas City, right? Like I wouldn't have to look at their fiscal year times, but they can add and subtract from the budget.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my audio here, but
I was just saying that certainly other cities like Kansas City can add and subtract from the budget and they still get it in on time. So I would just, I would look to this as we move forward with this to look for and hope and assume that we will have collaboration to get it done and not be Congress, right? And always getting budgeted. So I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Alderman Ryan, questions, comments? Oh, Director Payne.
Just thank you, Director Payne, for your testimony here. I share Alderwoman Velasquez's opinion that we are a bit of an outlier. A whole lot of other cities are able to pass budgets in a timely fashion with much more input from the legislative branch. I think when I talk to my constituents, they're always pretty surprised how little the aldermen actually have to do with the budget. And they're very surprised that if we don't pass a budget, the mayor's budget essentially just goes into effect. I think that leaves us in a pretty, you had mentioned the idea that this kind of forces compromise between the two entities. But I'd say that the compromise certainly gets skewed one way when there's a disagreement. But thank you again for your testimony. And with that, I'll yield.
All right, thank you, Alderman Ryan. Alderman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Payne, for being here. I always learn something when you speak. And I just had a question just in reference to the history that you gave us, because I'm thinking about when you said that it went to Thanksgiving. So did they not have the same deadlines and timelines on theirs back then, and where it just automatically went into effect and how we have that now?
no, they didn't. That was part of the reform
That
effort.
was part of the reform effort. Okay.
Right.
Okay. And just for my own clarity and for people that might be watching, what we're doing today, how does that impact the timelines that are in place now?
There is a question in my mind, and I don't know if you've discussed this, about the situation where, let's say you've done an item and then it gets vetoed. Okay, so let's follow through. Let's say in June 28th you approve all this, but it's items that are in contrary to what the mayor believes should be. So there's a veto.
Mhm.
Well, then fiscal year starts July 1st. Where does that leave us? Because there's a stated, the charter basically states that if you've not finally acted upon the budget by the start of the fiscal year, then the budget that's submitted becomes the budget. But is that what's contemplated, or is that, or are you going beyond, because you passed your budget, but now it's been vetoed? So is that deadline now impacted by the fact that you have the opportunity to override a veto, and then you'll be doing that in July? or not? And I'm not quite clear on that question.
Thank you. That was, you verbalized better than I could what I was thinking in the scenario that I was running through my head. So I will wait to hear from the sponsor and of course from our speakers from the Charter Commission as well. And see how we move forward on that piece. Cause I don't want to, I don't want to muddy it that way either. I am in support of it. I am clearly as an audit person and knowing the barriers and everything, I am in support, but I do want it to be in best practices. So thank you so much for answering my question. And again, for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Alderman. Now, Director Payne, so in theory, because I don't know the ins and outs, I'm not a lawyer, the mayor could, because which law overrides what? If a mayor vetoes it on the 29th and it's not on her desk by the 1st and signed, then naturally her budget will go into effect, or their budget. So in theory, you're saying with this proposed ballot measure before us, that a mayor could actually just decide to veto, and then her or his budget would become the budget by the overstanding charter. Am I correct in assuming that the mayor, that we actually are giving the mayor extra power, it seems like at this point?
Again, I'm not sure, because I know if you look at the default language shall be considered to be approved. If not passed, if not finally acted upon, shall be considered to be approved. So once you have approved an ordinance, that ordinance is then considered sent to the mayor. Now, what happens if the mayor vetoes? I mean, now you're beyond that language there. I'm not a lawyer either.
No, never mind. It just, you opened up a can of worms in my mind with that, we're giving the mayor actually another step. Or a mayor, not this mayor, any mayor.
Yeah, I couldn't definitively answer that question.
I don't know if that's something that even the sponsor has considered, if this may actually backfire somehow. I don't know if we, but that is something that was just brought to light in my mind. So, but with that, if you would like to hang around for a while, Paul, while we have the other speakers speak in case something else comes up, are you able to hang with us?
Sure.
All right. That's my administrative term, hang with us. Would you mind remaining, sir? All right, Alderman, anything to close on our to comment on before you go to your next speaker?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add to it. I think it's very clear, even right now, the board has the ability to have the decreasing, right? So the E&A, and we have to remember, it's just not the mayor's budget, the director writes it, but it's E&A that all approve it, right? Currently, the way it stands, if the board of aldermen makes a decrease, we send it back to E&A. They currently have the authority to, if you want to call it, veto or not approve it. And then that comes back to the board. By just adding the increase, it's the same thing. They have the authority to veto it or not approve it. And what we just seen in the last two budget cycles is we actually sent decreasing amendments, and we sent, I guess the director would say, recommendations for increasing, even though they were amendment form and we voted on it. I would just push back a little bit, because if we do not make any changes, the ordinance is clear, or the charter is clear, that July 1st, the budget that started with E&A will go into effect. So even if they don't take our decreasing and our increasing, if we add that, there will never be, I think, this moment of the budget doesn't go into effect, because that was also changed, I believe, under Shamo's time, that made the window and changed the budget time shorter, so that the budget will always be done on July 1st. So it's just a little pushback there, that it still will be done July 1st, regardless if the board doesn't approve a budget or not. And I know in the past, the board hasn't approved the budget from E&A, and the original budget that started with E&A still went into effect.
All right. With that, we will, which speaker would you like to go first, sir? Mr. Aldridge.
Out of respect, maybe the chairwoman should go first, and she's a chair.
All right. Would you please unmute? Thank you very much. If you raise your right hand, you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Help me God, yes.
Okay. With that, please state your name for the record and proceed with your.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Brianna Bobo. I am the chair of the St. Louis City Charter Commission, which is organized on behalf of the citizens of the city. We are charged with a pretty large task of updating the language throughout the charter. And so we've coalesced as Alderman Aldridge mentioned, that we have 7 big areas that we've decided to focus on. And one of those is germane to the budget. And so essentially where we've landed is that we believe as a commission that the budget power should be housed within the Board of Aldermen, with the power and authority to change that as they see fit and to establish the budget again as they see fit without necessarily needing extra sets of approval. And so that's kind of where we've landed. I do want to commend Alderman Aldridge for reaching out and kind of just ensuring that we are aligned from that perspective. But that's where we landed. And I do want to kind of affirm what has been stated thus far, in that other cities of our size or larger and who have populations that are also trending in the right direction in terms of growth, a lot of them have very similar characteristics. And one of those is that the city council or the Board of Aldermen has a little bit more power and authority, specifically in the budget area. And so the standalone component that we have kind of agreed upon is just to empower this council or this body with the authority to increase budgetary amounts. And that's separate and apart from another, I would say, tangential proposed charter amendment, which is something we are internally referring to as ENA heavy reform. But even if that's something that doesn't ultimately move forward, which would kind of just alter the relationship and responsibilities within the comptroller and the mayor as well, we still believe that it's very important for the Board of Aldermen to have that budgeting power and authority. And so that's what I will say. I will also mention again, for the record, I think it's important that we think to not necessarily what is comfortable and what we have current state, but what will allow us growth and malleability to match what is best practice in the future as well. And so with that, I'm also going to pass it. I think the vice chair would also need to be sworn in just based on protocol. I do have to drop for a work call, but I have complete faith that he can answer any questions. But that's what I wanted to contribute.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If with raise of hands, anyone have any questions or comments of the chair of the Charter Commission? Alderman Velazquez.
Just want to say thank you for being here and joining us today.
All right, thank you. Alderman Ryan? No? Clerk Hubbard?
No questions. Thank you, Chairwoman.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Thank you very
Sorry.
much for your presence.
Nothing from me, Chair. I apologize. Didn't get to the mute button fast enough.
All
It
right,
happens.
okay.
Thank you all.
You get my age, those are called naps. All right. Okay, thank you very much, Brianna. And Mr. Sheridan, if you would raise your right hand and unmute, and you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, with that, please proceed. Introduce
All right.
yourself for your name
Yeah.
for the record, please.
Yes, thank you. Travis Sheridan, Vice Chair of the St. Louis Charter Commission and proud resident of the 14th Ward in Old North St. Louis. Chair Vollmer, thank you for having me. Committee, thank you for letting me speak. As Chair Bobo mentioned, we've done quite a bit of research around this through talking with experts as well as public testimony related to some of the changes for the St. Louis Charter. One of the things that we have noticed, and Alderwoman Velazquez brought this up, is that a lot of our efforts related to changes in the charter have to do with modernizing the city government and making sure that we are able to compete with our peer cities, even from a structure standpoint. And so the changes that we are proposing and recommending align with the board bill that Alderman Aldrich introduced and sponsored. And so we fully support that. We don't see it as a conflict. And if nothing else, we see this as further evidence that this is something that's trending in the right direction. When the alderman reached out to me to ensure that we weren't crossing wires or anything along those lines, what I shared with him is that, this is to do the will of the people and do the work of the people. And so if this gets moved forward through the process of the Charter Commission, or if it can be moved forward through this process, we are fully supportive of that. So that's all. I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you, sir. Alderman Velasquez, any questions, Mr. Sheridan?
I think just for the record, and thank you, Mr. Sheridan, it's good to see you. I think if you could just maybe just give some overall, cities, places, just again, since this is part of the on the record conversation of what you've seen and why the commission believes this makes sense for St. Louis, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. We've looked, Kansas City was already mentioned as one. I'm going to go through my memory. I believe Cincinnati and Indianapolis were two other cities that we looked at that had a similar model. And then I'll be hard pressed to remember the other cities offhand. I'm happy to provide that as follow up to this committee. But there were the cities that are about the same size as St. Louis, what we would consider our peer cities, were the ones that we looked at.
Great. Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Alderman Narayan, any questions of Mr. Sheridan?
No questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. And Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Hello, Alderwoman. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Sheridan, for being here. And I just thought about something when Alderwoman Velasquez spoke, because some people might be watching that might not have even followed the commission and the amazing work that you all pushed and pulled through. First, I want to thank you for that, right? Your commitment and all of y'all's commitment on that commission. But just for the people watching, was there any pushback, or was this in the commission on how we asked questions today for Director Payne or anything? Was there any pushback, or was this a 100%, this is what the people will want? Again, this is since we are trying to promote what the people will want in a better government.
From across the 9 commissioners, and I don't remember the exact vote, but I believe this is one of them that received unanimous approval to move forward. There was, during the deliberations, there was discussion around it. I think the thing where we really fell was that we looked at peer cities and looked at modernizing our government. I think and this is true, I would say this is true with a lot of our deliberations, and this is not an indictment on anybody in any office right now or assuming any position within the city of St. Louis. But we understand that there, with any sort of change related to the charter, anybody that might be in an incumbent position, whether that's elected or staff position or leadership position, might have opposing views to some of the changes that take place. We think that that's actually healthy, and we need to hear those from folks, especially because a number of people have really helped shape where we are today, and I expect that it will help shape how we go into the future. So I will say there hasn't been any topic that we've brought up that has been without any level of disagreement, either from among the charter or from the general population, that as testimony has come in. And I think that means that it's healthy and that we are pushing in areas where change might need to take place.
All
That's
right.
great. I'm glad you brought that up about change and being healthy, because I agree with that. And I always say it, that healthy change happens in the middle anyway. So thank you for bringing up those points. And I hope that, none of us are not just looking at this, but any of these charter things as it relates to ourselves personally, but as for the greater good and for the whole and for a better government for us when we're not elected anymore, as a matter of fact. So thank you so much. And thank you for your service.
Okay, then again, what we're doing here are ballot measures, finally putting before the people, which takes for people watching, it takes a super majority to pass these out. We've tried many times. The only one that's really passed out, I believe, in my time was when we cut the board in half, which they thought was going to save money, which I don't believe it did. But before I let you close, Mr. Aldridge, I would like some final comments from Director Payne, just because of, I respect his time in office and all his knowledge, and hearing all this, if he has just some closing comments for it before you close, sir. Mr. Payne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I don't really have much more to add, although I will take one exception in terms of the categorization about the willingness to change, because I think the idea is that, and what I was trying to convey is that you're trying to get a collaborative effort where you're both moving in the same direction. That's why I mentioned Kansas City. That would actually be a drastic change if you're going to a city manager type form of government. That would be completely different. But I was actually surprised that hadn't been considered when we're looking at reform effort. Because when I look at that just specifically from a budget process, everyone is moving in the same direction, because you've got a city manager and that proposes the budget that the council takes up. That's why I had seen that as a potential alternative that gets everyone working in the same direction as potential, as opposed to the one where you might have some butting heads in the future. And so that would be a drastic change. So that's sort of where I was coming from when I mentioned that.
All right. As always, thank you very much. Thank you very much. With that, Alderman Aldridge, you are welcome to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to have this hearing, but also several weeks ago, saying, hey, let's bring the director back. I think his comments was helpful. I also want to thank the chair and the vice chair of the Charter Commission. I know they looked at several different ways to modernize city government. Like I say, they have 7 top points, and this is one of them that ranked very high. I know when we talk about city manager, I know that was one of the things they considered, which would be a dramatic change. And I think a lot of these things that are coming out of the Charter Commission, if we don't, take them all up at the board now to send them to the ballot, it allows healthy conversations to look at how we can change. St. Louis kind of is archaic when it comes to our charter and our government, but I would just end with, I think this is a good way to align ourselves with other cities, let alone with our state. In the state house, being a former house member, we have that ability to decrease and increase, and we always send it to the Senate in the proper time and then to the governor. Kansas City do it. I don't, I have just a little pushback to think that this would stop compromise. I think this would be, if anything, this only allows for compromise to continue on. We've done it this budget cycle. Just myself allowing funds to decrease from a department and increase to the circuit attorney, Gabe Gore. We sent that over to ENA in the proper time, and they got it back to us, and we'll be taking that budget up this Friday. So, I just think this is a way to catch up to where other cities are when it comes to budget authority. And before I close, I do see Alderman Ryan has his hand up, so I would.
He finally found a button. Yes, sir. Alderman Ryan, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Aldridge. Thank you, Chair Vollmer. I was just looking at the agenda on this and noted that I am not a co-sponsor on this. I was a co-sponsor on first read, so I just wanted that noted. Thank you.
Well, and okay.
It's noted.
So, Laura, please make note of that. I saw Alderwoman Velasquez has her hand up. You would like to be a co-sponsor also?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Please make note of that. You were probably co-sponsors on the original one before it became a. Sounds like reruns from what's happening there. Okay.
That must have been on TV.
You guys aren't holding up.
I was around.
That show.
Whatever what's happening is, yeah.
Is that WhatsApp?
That was in the 70s.
That was a joke.
All right. With that, I will entertain a motion for approval of Board Bill number 30 as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Previous
With that,
row.
objection
Oh,
previous roll.
Okay.
All right. Or please call the roll.
Alderman Ryan,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez,
Aye.
Chair Vollmer.
No. Just an old man, sorry.
We have 3 aye votes and 1 no.
All right, thank you. By your vote, you have passed out Board Bill 30 as amended. to go to the full board. With that, we have no written testimony, no resolutions for review, no committee discussions. With that, we are all present,
Yes.
so will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, as long as Narayan finds his nap button.
Second.
Okay. Meeting
All in-
adjourned.